Link. Come on. You can do it. Hopefully I don't go dark again this week. It hasn't happened in my podcast so far, but hopefully it'll be down here. All right. Where's that? That. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. I am Rob Howe, joined by Scott Docterman from The Athletic. It is Friday, February the 2nd, a little after 9, about 9:15 a.m. Central Time. Apologize for not being able to do it yesterday. I was shooting photos at State Wrestling, so that one's on me. Appreciate Scott adjusting his schedule. Did you watch any of the Pro Bowl stuff last night?
Not the Pro Bowl. I was kind of flipping around as always because I'm a chronic channel surfer. I watched the end of Wisconsin, Nebraska. I did watch some of the Shrine Bowl, and but I wasn't watching it very closely and just changing around. I don't know. I wanted to see Logan Lee, but mostly watch Talia Tagovailoa, so that was my night. I couldn't tell you what else I watched because I usually just turn on YouTube and 100 top songs of 1983, and I don't agree with that,
Yeah, but you need things like that to kind of get you in a better mood, so to speak, when work is not giving that to you. like recently, but yeah, it was kind of cool. I saw Linderbaum was part of the snapping competition. That was pretty funny. Jason Kelsey, they had you've seen this before where they do the different points for this, and the smaller the hole, the bigger the points. There's the 5 point in the middle, and that's just that's the highest one. So he's just firing them at 5. He didn't even worry about 1 through 4. He's just firing them at 5. He's like, go big. But I think Lindy got one in the 3 or the 4. He did okay because it was more for long snapping. Like when they brought the long snappers out, they were really good at it. Yeah. And then Sam Laporta was part of the catching off the jugs gun. I think he got up to 5. His last one, he kind of was fumbling and fell backwards, and he goes, oh shit. And they didn't get him. They were bleeping everybody out, but he got his shit through, which was nice.
Yeah, that sounds like
well,
Sam.
Though. He was one of the ones at the end, which was kind of cool. So
I should have watched that, I suppose.
Yeah, I look forward to that stuff. Just kind of the skill stuff. The guys having fun. It was Peyton and Eli were the coaches on the opposite sides, AFC, NFC, and they were going at it. So it was a good show. It was entertaining, and I kind of like the Pro Bowl how it's set up now. It used to just be a joke, so at least they have some fun with it now, and I think the fans have some fun with it. So that's on Sunday, I believe.
Yeah.
The whatever they call it now,
it's flag football.
Yeah. So and then Senior Bowl is this weekend too, I think.
Yeah.
Corey Taylor competing in that.
Yeah. Yeah, he commanded quite the crowd, I guess, in Mobile. So and last night, Logan Lee was in Dallas or whatever for the Shrine Bowl. So people are, and I've been noticing Cooper DeJean doing a lot of drills out in California, so he looks good or is getting there. So I'll check him out here in about 4 weeks down in Indianapolis. So it's the draft season is upon us.
Yeah, there is no off season anymore.
No,
there's always something going on. Seems like for every sport, but especially football. Football just doesn't stop. And it's not stopping around here either, is it?
No, it is not.
It was a busy January into February. Let's start with the Kaden Proctor story that you wrote last night, because that's the freshest news. We had kind of social media caught hold of this after his interviews a few weeks ago at Carver Hawkeye Arena when he talked about staying in touch with Iowa when he was at Alabama, caused the stir. I guess Iowa looked into it, found a minor violation. I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, you basically encompassed everything. That back in September when Kaden was struggling at Alabama and people were climbing all over him, and first we saw the quote tweet before from Tyler Barnes, like I think it was Mike Farrell had written, Iowa fans must be loving him struggling. And Tyler said something like, no, we're rooting for him. He's got this or something. And then next thing you know, I guess Tyler sent him a text. Well, he did send him a text. And it's just more like, hang in there, buddy. You got this. You're doing all right. Very innocuous. And actually probably something that certainly something he appreciated. He brought it up, but that's a no-no. It's impermissible contact between, someone from one school to someone at another school. And so Iowa found the text. Beth Getz talked about it and said, we looked into it. There was one text, there was a human element to it, and it's in process right now, meaning it hasn't been officially sent off, but it is a level 3, which is minor. Although from the Alabama fans that have taken on this and aggregated it even before I got a chance to write it, because I tweeted it first, you'd think that they deserve the death penalty for it. But no, it's so they've interviewed Tyler, they interviewed Kaden. They're going to send it in. Traditionally, with this type of penalty, you get further education and or admonishment, which is don't do it again. It's the ultimate, wrist slap. And again, the self-righteousness from some of these Alabama fans. I mean, I'm like, nice. Stop it. You don't think you guys do anything, but I'm not getting into wading in that pool. I already get bad enough with Nebraska fans.
Yeah, you don't need another fan base coming after you every time you tweet something. So
yeah, so I just let it.
They're already gonna. Whenever you tweet something about Kaden now, they're gonna be on you. So
yeah, yeah. So it was more like mute conversation. I don't care to hear Iowa fans talk about it either, because because then people are like, F the NCAA and all. And it's like, no, they're turning it in, because if again something bad happens down the road and then they start looking into stuff and it's like, you had this and you didn't turn it in, then it's lack of institutional control, and then you get in real bad trouble. So this is minor. It's something that, Kaden brought up and move on. And in some ways, it's kind of like when, remember Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis came to a football game and met with Adam Woodbury, and that they had to turn that in. It's basically along those same lines.
Yeah, that was, I don't remember what came of that, but it wasn't much. And yeah, I mean, they have these rules for a reason, and I get it. You don't want to coach from a current staff texting a student athlete in another program. I think that's probably good not to have any of that going on. So there's no gray area or anything like that. And I mean, I remember when Tyler asked me several years ago not to speak with recruits on the field when they were visiting Kinnick Stadium, because that's a violation. And compliance told him that, and compliance told me that. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. And it's kind of weird because I get to know these kids, and you see them for the first time on the field, and they're like, hey, how you doing, Rob? Good to see you. And you're like, I can't really talk.
Yeah.
So I get it. There's these little violations that make sense. I mean, you don't want, and darn well that there are journalists, news people at other stadiums talking to recruits when they're on the field, but credit to Iowa for wanting to follow the rules.
Yeah, exactly. And this is one that will pass. I mean, it's something that people will, there are people who are, treating this like it's a level 1, it's not. I mean, it's, and really, and this is the innocent part of it. And Beth brought it up, and I quoted her on it, and she's like, this is like, an assistant coach moves on and they form real human relationships with these players. And an assistant coach goes on and texts somebody at his old school, hey, how's your mom doing?
Yeah.
And it's because for, maybe their mom's sick or in the hospital, but you still can't do that either. So, now it's out there. People know it. It's become, viral type of situation. It's not going to affect his eligibility. I can't see that at all. And, and I actually, that day, I kind of felt bad for Matt Weitzel because he hadn't actually signed at that point. He was there, and, everybody hit up Kaden beforehand. And then later on when he was leaving, then there were some more TV cameras, and Matt's like, guys, he hasn't signed yet. And you're like, okay, crap, but it's, well, sometimes Iowa drags its feet on too many different things. So.
Yes, it does. And it's, to close on this, it's unfortunate that you can't do what Tyler did, because his was, he meant well by it, but you have to protect against the idiots that are going to abuse it if you allow it. So that's why the rules are in place.
Yeah, exactly. And he's fine. I know he was really worried after the fact, like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job over this, and you think about it, it's like, take the 10,000 foot view and go, all you're doing was saying hi to him. Now, was there an extra side benefit to what happened? Maybe, I don't know. But the words, again, we don't have access to them yet because it hasn't been sent in yet. I'm sure
the actual email or text message.
Yeah. Or at least I didn't yesterday because I was told about it. I have to file through a FOIA to get it, and it'd take up to 21 days. But Beth was just like, and you'll see that this is nothing, so I imagine that the NCAA, based on all the other issues right now, that this is not going to be one where they're going to say, okay, the student athlete in question is banned for the season, and they're Tyler Barnes is under a show cause or something for this.
Yeah, and I don't think Beth would say what she said to you guys and self-report this as a minor violation if the text was in any way more in violation, like, hey, hang in there, if you want to come home, you can, something like that. In the text. I mean, that's obviously a lot, and it doesn't sound like there's anything like that. So again, just texting a kid he got to know in the recruiting process, wishing him well, and there are reasons why the rules are in place, but this sounds like it's going to be a minor, and probably, like Scott said, a slap on the wrist. Just to close, or not close, but just to update on the gambling story, Scott, DCI released a statement saying it did nothing wrong, it did nothing illegal in searching the student athletes from Iowa and Iowa State who were charged in the gambling investigation. So basically what we have now is lawyers on both sides are going to fight this out.
Yeah, that's the only way they can do it, because DCI has to get a win. They can't lose this. Yep. Because if they lose this, everybody goes there, and there's already going to be political ramifications. Now in our state where it's landlocked with one party, I don't know how deep that's going to go, but still, it's significant. And they're going to fight it. And I know the attorney for, I think, Van Plum released his own statement that was something to that effect. So that no, this isn't legal or anything like that. So yeah, and DCI mentioned that, okay, and this is going to be up to the court to decide. So there we go. It's all going to be about the court.
And we'll see. Like you said, DCI needs to win, which makes you wonder. A lot of times in these cases, they just want to settle, save the public money, save taxpayers money from going to court on things like this. But this sounds like DCI wants to win, or needs to win, so a settlement is less likely in this situation.
Yeah, and the statement, which I can't say that I've covered police, and I haven't done that for a long time, but this is very rare for the Department of Public Safety in the state of Iowa to release a statement in the middle of, before the adjudication, and so to have this happen is significant in its own right, and and this is totally a CYA. I mean, they understand that the that the public is completely against them right now. And so they're trying to get at least some to see their point of view. But I don't think the majority do. I think the majority understands that, there are, whereas there is a dividing line between 100% back the blue versus those who are very skeptical of the blue. But in this case, I think people are like, there's a Fourth Amendment for a reason, where you need a probable cause and a warrant before you just start looking into things. And, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so I think this is going to be a fascinating breakdown, not only legally first, but politically second, just to see how the fault lines kind of crack.
Yeah, and unfortunately, if it swings the way where, the public, if the court of public opinion ends up being right, the worst thing that comes out of it is the student athletes like Noah Shannon lost an entire season. And beyond him, I mean, I don't want to leave anybody out. There were a lot of people affected by it. But if it does turn out that this was an illegal search, they can't get that back. They may get some money. They may get compensated in that way, but they can't get their careers back. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's the worst part. That's the collateral damage of this whole expedition that took place, is that, okay, you've got, several people charged and several guilty pleas, and some are going to court. But then you have the collateral damage are the players who weren't charged, but yet lost eligibility. I mean, you think about people like Jamari Harris, 2 games, Noah Shannon the entire season, for what? So you can have a notch on your, on your belt for, gambling. I mean, that's really ultimately what it came down to. And so right now, and then the same thing with Iowa State. I mean, a kid like Jake Remsburg or, and all the others, and the wrestling team at Iowa. I mean, none of them have been charged with a crime, but they've all lost their eligibility. And so unfortunately, those ramifications you can't get back. You can't reverse time. Even with the COVID year getting an extra year, you can't reverse the actual clock of time.
And we all get older. Can't stop time either.
Yeah.
Can't reverse it or stop it.
Yeah.
All right. To the meat of the podcast, we'll hit on the basketball wrestling after we talk more Iowa football. And the story that everybody's been waiting for, or the announcement that everybody's been waiting for, Iowa's offensive coordinator. It was interesting at the end of last week, I believe it was a week ago today, Scott, where a friend of yours sent you a photo, and that created the stir of, all right, it's going to be Kevin Johns. He's the offensive coordinator. And people were kind of on board with that. You're not going to get 100% approval rate on this hire unless it's Kyle Shanahan, which ain't happening. So, but that seemed to have some momentum, that people were into it. He was the photo you tweeted showed him and Kirk Ferentz at the Marriott across the street from Kinnick Stadium having coffee and maybe an omelet and orange juice. Hopefully they had orange juice or apple juice. I prefer apple juice to orange juice, but to each his own. But that didn't happen. And then Saturday at the women's game, Scott tweeted a picture of Ronnie Lester's jersey in the rafters and said, oh, maybe this is it. So it was good to see you have some fun on social media, regardless of the pushback, blowback you got from the angry mob on that platform.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to put it out there. The Lester jersey, actually, what's kind of funny is, Rob, I discovered it during the Star Spangled Banner. I had stood up, my hand was on my heart, I'm looking up at the flag, and then I look over and I see Lester 12, and I'm like, it's a sign. And so I tweeted it out, a sign with a question mark, and then 2/3 of the people are like, no, you're trolling, no, and I'm like, and it turns out on Sunday that seemed to be the case. So here we are with Tim Lester, and I think the majority of people now, which always happens, have kind of come around and thought, okay, I'll buy into this. There's still a lot of skepticism, and rightly so. I think that's legitimate, because we kind of thought a couple of years ago when Kirk made it sound like that the offense was going to be better and changed, and fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And it's now on fool me 4 or 5 times. I'm not going to be shamed anymore. So, but I also think that in watching a lot of what he was able to do with Western Michigan, and a granted different level of football, certainly different level of defenses he's facing. However, the execution and the style of play, I kind of like. So I'm interested to see how it all comes together, because I think it's got the potential to be better. And nothing could be worse, but better in a way where it looks like, oh, okay, this team can actually move the ball. Now, is that more than 24 points a game? I'm not going to predict that at all, but I'll say that it looks like, oh, if you get the right trigger man, yeah, I think I could see them scoring some touchdowns, a couple of touchdowns a game at least.
Yes, I think skepticism is probably fair, as you said, with what we've seen in recent years. And we've talked about it a lot. And I don't know, and I don't know as we'll ever know exactly how we got here. The Paul Christ period of time where it looked like he might be the guy. Joe Philbin's name was out there. Kevin Johns that we talked about. Was Tim Lester the number one guy? Did he emerge at the end? All of those things. I don't know how much information we're going to get, at the end, but it really doesn't matter. This is where we are, and you hope that he's got the right guy. And the column I wrote last week was basically, we don't know. And that's it. We don't know, because there are so many factors and parts of this puzzle. Does the quarterback come back healthy from an ACL tear? Does the head coach relinquish some of his philosophy, beliefs? Does he have to? Can Tim Lester work around exactly what Kirk Ferentz wants? The question and the formula here that has to work is, can Kirk and Tim Lester figure it out together? There were times when it worked with Ken O'Keefe. There were times when it worked with Greg Davis. There were times when it worked with Brian Ferentz. It just never worked consistently. Can Iowa, with this offensive coaching staff, get to that point where they're not going to have a top 50 offense, or maybe they will. I don't know. But can they at least get to a point where it's not just painful to watch? And that's what it's become.
Yeah, it's, the last 4 years, well, 3 especially for Iowa in the passing game, and last 4, it's been dreadful. It's been really hard. And how much of that is the scheme? How much of that is the personnel? I think, the play calling, I think all of it is worth diving into. I mean, you look at Nate Stanley, for instance, when he was quarterback, he threw 68 touchdowns. I mean, the last 3 years, I think they've thrown 27, 28, in the last 3 years. So it's like, that's a 40 touchdown pass difference. Is that all on Brian, or is it on quarterbacks? Well, I think the quarterback has a big factor in that. And, they tried to rectify it last year, bringing in Kaden McNamara. And it didn't work because Cade was never healthy. His quad, wasn't healthy enough in the spring to get all the reps. Then his quad, and then his ACL, and he's coming off a knee surgery before that. So there should be some skepticism there. But I think, can these two coalesce? I mean, Tim Lester likes to run RPO. There's room to run RPO without having a running quarterback per se. Sometimes they take the run, but it's really run pass option, meaning with your running back or pass. And that's one area that Iowa's really never exploited. And I think it's there for the taking, which is, if you can somehow block run and throw pass when you have slants or short passes across the middle, it's there. It's been there for a long time. The routes have not been run there, and the options have not been available. So I think if he can somehow maneuver that, The other part is, how does he work with an inline tight end? Because this is, he, over his final 2 years, 86% of his plays were with three wide receivers. Iowa last year, they usually run in like a third, and this is what it was like 32% was 12 personnel, 2 tight ends, 31% was 3 wide receivers. So, and then the rest was just kind of mixed up. So Iowa is varied. Can you run 2 tight ends a lot with what Tim Lester wants to do? Because that seems to be the strength of this team and this program. I think you can. So how do they marry it together? How do they work together? How much control does Kirk relinquish? How much and it's one thing, it's 4th and 1 at the 40. Yeah, he deserves that call. But, saying, oh, no, we can't run that play at 2nd and 7, that's completely different. So I don't know. I think we're all skeptical, but I think there's some promise here that shows that something can change.
And it's not most football is complementary. That's just the way it is. And you want to be smart when you're calling plays, whether you're on offense, defense, special teams, it doesn't really matter. I think Iowa is a little stricter in its complementary football and more conservative sometimes in its complementary football. And when you're that way, it makes it more difficult on the offense because the offense is not, I don't know if this is the right way to put it, not given the benefit of the doubt sometimes, not trusted, because you basically are like, well, we'll live to fight another day and we'll punt and let the defense, we'll get the ball back in a better field position. That's hard on an offensive coordinator. It is. It's hard to know that you've got your opportunities aren't as great maybe as they would be with somebody that's a little bit more risky or somebody that's a little less conservative. So to me, that's an interesting part of this too. Can Tim Lester operate in that kind of in that world and or like you said, and like I said before, how much is Kirk willing to like be less conservative or let the offense make plays, let the playmakers make plays. That's another question that I wonder. I'm fascinated to see how this plays. No matter how this plays out, it's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. Because the one thing that you mentioned, the word that I think stands out to me is trust. And the last several years, it's understandable that there was not a lot of trust on offense. Spencer, who I think very highly of as a player, as a potential coach, as a person, wasn't very accurate. And there was not a lot of trust that this offense was going to win. I mean, you think back to the Penn State game, here in 2021, where it was 3 versus 4. Late in the game, they had the opportunity to run the clock out. They took knees. They took knees at basically midfield. And it's like, let's do the least risky thing we could possibly do and put our give the ball back to our opponent with a chance to win rather than try to even run the football. Okay, that's as risk averse as possible. But I think the fear was fumbling the snap, something bad happening as opposed to trying to make something good happen. That's got to change. You cannot play that way. You cannot play scared, and that's both on the field and philosophically. Now, you can do that from time to time to try to win like they did, and they did win because they had a great defense and the other team's quarterback was a backup and he wasn't any good. But, if you're going to tie the hands of your offensive coordinator in the future doing that, good luck, man. That's just not going to work. Now, the last year was even worse because you just had nothing. Now you're going to have to make something, and maybe Tim Lester can, if it's healthy Cade McNamara, maybe. But I also think you're looking at your QBs right now. Either you got to have a lot of faith in Marco Lainez or you need to hit the portal because you just cannot have that situation again. Deacon, tried hard, but it wasn't good enough not for the Big Ten. And then to top it off, Rob, they need to do something at wide receiver because it's been a wasteland for a long, long time. And it's been coaching, attrition, and development that is, when you have like the greatest tight end tradition in the country right now and the worst at wide receiver, you got to look at yourself on that.
Yes. And I think, that's the puzzle we've talked about. You're over scholarship limit. How do you do this? How do you fortify your wide receiver core, when you don't have scholarships to give, and you're not doing it now. So if you wait till after the spring and bring guys in, they have less time to get acclimated. That's not ideal, but you have to do what you have to do, right? I just, hopefully the new wide receiver coach, who we believe is John Budmeyer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hopefully he helps in developing that position, because I think that is the most important thing with that position, in addition to maybe getting kids that are maybe a kid or two that's ready to hit the ground running, that can produce right away in 2024. And then to me, the most exciting part of Tim Lester is his knowledge of the quarterback position and being able to coach that position. I think, when Ken was here back in the latter part of last decade, I thought he worked well. I thought he developed Nate Stanley pretty well over the years. We've got lost there doing that. And I think hopefully Tim Lester can do that, because he's got some young guys to work with, Scott. Besides Cade, Deacon could certainly use some coaching. And then you got Marco and Reeser coming in. And then Sullivan after that. You've got young guys coming through here. It's good. Quarterback development is going to be very, very important.
Yeah, exactly. Because, going back, what I like about this with Tim Lester is he played it. And in his league, he played it at a very high level. Yeah.
He threw for a shitload of yards at Western Michigan.
Exactly.
When I was looking up, I was like, whoa. And he played for Chicago in the XFL, right?
Yeah. Yep. So he's got experience playing professionally. He played, a ton at Western Michigan. He's in their Hall of Fame as a quarterback. So he understands that position. And then, of course, this year he spent as a senior analyst with the Green Bay Packers. I don't think he worked much with the offense. He'll tell us next week when we get a chance to talk to him. But, this to me is an opportunity to have a quarterback help quarterbacks. And Brian was not a quarterback. This was a move we all saw coming, the situation. It's like, it's like lean into why would you put an offensive lineman as quarterback coach? And this is my fear. I hate to say it with John Budmeyer at wide receiver. I could be off on this, but this position has been just a wasteland, as we said, out of a 10-year block from 2012 to 2021, there were 24 freshman wide receivers, Rob, that were recruited. 5 lasted from 24 to 5 lasted their entire career. And this is before really the portal era.
That's just alarming.
And I hate to say it, but if the portal was available for Brandon and Amir, Nico stuck it out. He was another one, but you had like Max Cooper and so just out of that mix, you're going. And I think Tavon might have been one of the others, but it's just, you've got to really assess and look at it and say, what did we do wrong here? Why can't we develop our wide receivers? And now you're moving a guy who never really coached that position. I think this position needs somebody who actually played it and understood it and can see it and can argue for it and say, my guy can go out and beat his guy, that guy over there. Let him make a play. And I think this, that's one thing Kirk does, and you just kind of grit your teeth and go, okay, is he wants to get the right coaches, but it doesn't really matter where they're going to be. Abdul Hodge was a great linebacker at Iowa. He's coaching tight ends. Tim Paulsek came in as a quarterback OC, and he's going to coach offensive line. And now John Budmeyer is a quarterback, and now he's going to coach wide receivers. It's just, get guys for that position, But anyway, I mean, and again, maybe he develops them. Maybe they turn out to be great because he's compensating for all the things he has done. But can you walk out if you're John Budmeyer and go to a great wide receiver and say, we're going to make you a great wide receiver at Iowa? What have you done? Nothing, so I don't know.
Yeah, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. When I'm speaking to John Budmeyer, that he can handle this position, but I don't think it's one that breeds confidence in folks. He was brought in to help develop quarterbacks alongside Brian Ferentz, kind of as his right-hand man, and that hasn't worked out really well. And I'm with you. I think the play at wide receiver would have been maybe even just get a name. Mm-hmm. Somebody who's played the position, has a name, can go into somebody's living room and say, listen, we have not been good at this position. I'm in charge now. I've played this position at a high level, and I'm going to turn this position around. Will you come to Iowa and help me? Whether that's, I know Marvin McNutt's name's been thrown out, people like that.
Yeah.
To me, that's more inspiring than this hire. And I don't want to dump on Budmeyer.
Yeah, right.
Because maybe he turns out to be the right guy. Maybe he interviewed with Kirk and said, listen, here are my ideas for this position. Then he talked with Tim Lester, and Tim Lester's like, okay, this is what I plan to do with the route tree. Can we work together on it? Maybe that stuff's all gone on. Hopefully it has, and hopefully it works. But just on the front end here, Scott, it just makes you kind of raise an eyebrow.
Yeah, it does. And I've gotten to know Marvin really well. I mean, on Monday nights, we work together on Iowa Live, and we've talked for a long time about the receivers and what's going on. And he coached at Co. And I know granted, going from Co to Iowa is quite a jump, but he's also the best to ever do it at Iowa. I mean, statistically for sure. And he could, I know like Amir and Brandon went to him a lot for workouts. And I asked Amir specifically about it, and Brandon and him got really close. But Amir was like, look, we go in our recruiting room and we look up and we see his picture there, and you see his numbers, you get immediate respect. And, for somebody like that, I did it. Here's how I did it. Here's what I can show you. That does it. And, and I really don't want to lean on this card very much, but diversity is an issue too. And I think that's
I let you take that.
I know, and I don't want to say too much about it, but it is a factor, and so, but I think having Marvin, it doesn't have to be Marvin, but somebody who played the position at least in the Big Ten and had success, or at a major college and had success, and maybe had even a cup of coffee at the NFL, but. You wore a jersey and got paid for it. That's something that people respect. And I think that's something that Iowa kind of needs at that position, because you just need that growth. Here's how I ran that route against him, against this player. And like, oh, you played against him? Yeah. And I caught a pass. I caught a touchdown. I did this. And I think that's something that, absolutely in this situation, and again, John may come in and he may revamp it, and it may look really good and it works well. And so I don't want to make it look like I'm like totally against it. I just kind of question the lack of opportunity here. I'm more in favor of Tim Lester coming in as OC as I am just, hey, the senior analyst we've had for 2 years, we like him as a person and we think he's a good coach. And well, there's an opening over here. We're going to put him over there.
Yeah, and for the Marvin only coached at Co College, or that's the level that he's coaching at or coached at. Liddell Betts was coaching in high school before coming back here as the running back coach, and I would submit that he's done a pretty good job with that position.
Yeah, yes. I would say on offense, he's probably done the best job, of the group in my eyes. That's no slight to Abdul. But, he's already had really good players there. And, and George, we'll find out this year if it's George or if it's the players, because now that you got, a 5-star talent plus the entire unit back, you should be, borderline dominant at times. No more the Utah State game.
Yeah, 160 plus starts on the offensive line among the top 8 guys.
Yeah,
the guys that have played the most. That's a lot. So really, to Scott's point, it's time for George to cook.
Yeah, and if you have the running backs that they have, and you have healthy tight ends now, and that offensive line, worst case scenario, you should be able to play slam ball with 3/4 of your opponents and play, at least be competitive at worst, and if not be dominant at times. So I think that's, and it's the other piece. It's the passing game, and that's what we're talking about here with Tim Lester. Yeah, finally a quarterback working with quarterbacks, and then on the other side you have wide receivers. We'll see with John Bunmeyer. So
yeah, and I think it's a wait and see approach with all of this, based on the discussion Scott and I have had for the last half hour or so. I think I sense that the fan base is doing. I mean, you're going to have the shout from the rooftop people that are pissed, and we're going to be pissed again unless it was a name, like a super big name. But I think most people are like, we know Kirk is involved in the offense. We know he's got to give a little bit. It's a plus that this guy's a quarterback and can teach quarterbacks. And you just kind of got to wait and see. I think most people, after, as you said, fool me once, shame on you. Mm-hmm. I think after the last several years, I'm okay with people just kind of, because I'm doing this. I don't want to poo-poo it, but I'm also not going to get behind and say, all right, we got, it's going to take off and Iowa's offense is going to be great. You just look at the positives and what could be, but you also have to acknowledge the potential pitfalls.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Rob. I mean, you have to, right now, we have to evaluate it as it is. No more aspirational talk, no more, hey, I think this will be better because of this. I mean, I've at times maybe I felt like I bought in a little bit too much, and just thought, oh, okay, well, now that Brian's taken over this is what they're doing, and it seems more clear. It didn't work. And the amount of political capital that Kirk expended on this, the equity, it's gone. So now there's the trust is gone, but that doesn't mean that they can't do it. I mean, they do have some pieces. And then you look at Tim Lester's background with wide receivers and how that's worked, and Sky Moore, and Jaden Reed was there briefly before he went to Michigan State, and Eskridge and things like that. They were all kind of in the same ballpark, and you look at what a Caleb Brown might be able to do, and then you look at can Seth Anderson play a pretty good role. And then it's about development at those positions, because you got a lot of young guys that haven't played a lot. Not only the guys who came in last year, like Bowie and Howard and Moda, but also Jake Bostic, who's just finally getting into the games. And can one of them elevate into that role? And then maybe it's Caden Regent, maybe it's Alec Wick. That can. Really, they don't need a ton of wide receivers. They just need 3 to 4 who are pretty good. And if they can do that, then I think they're okay. It's just, but, can they organize the offense to where you can use those matchups? And one of the things I think that they were terrible at last year was sometimes they were running routes and they were putting people in positions where they were not successful based on their own lack of abilities. And there was one play, Northwestern, the interception in the end zone, where they had Nico Ragaini run in motion from left to right, then run up 20, I think they were at the 28-yard line, run into the end zone, and he couldn't get inside leverage on the corner, and the corner intercepted the ball in the end zone. And it's like, okay, you need to throw the ball in the least likely place to be intercepted, but it's also like, why did you organize that play with your shortest wide receiver and have him run across the field 40 yards, basically in motion, and then run up another 30 and put him in a position to where he has to fight for the ball? Why do that? Not, first of all, putting somebody in motion and running up like that, he better be unguarded, or at least, some sort of zone where you can be easy to get open. But second of all, that's your only route. I mean, why can't you have another person run that route? Why can't you run the different one? So that to me is why they need somebody else to organize this offense, because it's just there's just not a lot of, it didn't work. Frankly, we know it didn't work. I mean, the statistics bear it out, but even beyond that, when you look at the execution and the coordination, it just was not successful in any way or shape or form.
I like the two kids they're bringing in too, KJ Parker and Reese Vanderzee. I don't know if they'll be able to help right away. Most of the Iowa receivers that come in are development guys that need a little bit of time, but those guys have a pretty good starter kit. So we'll see if they're able to get themselves in the mix. One thing I wanted to address before we go to break, Scott, is the belief, theory, idea that Kirk Ferentz didn't want to hire an offensive coordinator to make Brian look bad. It is when we get to like ridiculous takes and theories, these are the ones that just make me shake my head. Why he would destroy his legacy, why somebody who's as competitive as he is would do that is just insanity.
Yeah, that one I rolled my eyes. I'm like, I'm going to give it credence here, because who would do that? I mean, the reality is, if he's going to manipulate this hire, it's because he wants more of his fingers in the offense. It's somebody who he can control. It's not somebody who can make his son look better, because then it makes himself look worse. It's like, if nobody can run this offense, then maybe they need to get somebody else who can run the team. Because if everybody else in the world can do this, then why can't you? And you're doing pretty well with the defense, obviously. You need to switch up things on offense. So I think that's ridiculous. There's a lot of ridiculous theories out there, but that one was probably at the top of the list.
That and Scott Frost being a candidate for the position were the two things that made me shake my head the most. All right, we're going to take a quick break here, come back, talk some hoops and wrestling. Got a question on the chat room that we can answer when we get back from Avery Martinson about football as well. Got to get my read up here, unprepared as usual. How? Support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Thank you to Systems Unlimited for the great work in our community for over half a century, and we certainly appreciate their support of the podcast. We're going to hear from a few more sponsors now, and Scott and I'll be back on the other side. See, I told you that wouldn't be long, and we're back here on the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. We appreciate the support of our sponsors. Scott, in the chat room, Avery Martinson, thoughts on Marco getting the spring to take the first team snaps with Cade being injured? I think that's a likely scenario, no?
It has to, right? I mean, no offense in the world is, no quarterback guru is going to make Deacon do that much better, and you brought the young guy in for a reason. Give him a chance, because otherwise you might as well just cut him loose. After what we saw last year. Okay, he was a true freshman. He was working, they elevated him to the second team in the bowl game. He ran around a ton. It wasn't really in a traditional setting. Of course, for me, I was like, start him in November, but at least he should have started like at halftime. They should have brought him in as the lead. Yeah, I think so. I don't know that it's going to matter though as much, Rob, as maybe people want. because they're gonna have what, 3 quarterbacks, 2 scholarship guys taking snaps, handing off the ball, working with everybody. So I don't know. They'll probably rotate a lot, but yes, I think you need to see what you got with Marco, with the first team, because you just don't know. I mean, unless they bring somebody in after spring ball, which I think they're going to have to, you got to be prepared for what may happen with Cade, because he's coming off an ACL. That's not like coming off a bone bruise, unless you're Terry Roberts, and it's really rough for the longest time,
To your point again, though, I think, and hopefully over time here, people will get have a better handle on what RPO is. And again, we don't know how much that's going to be incorporated, how much that's going to be used here. But RPO is not the quarterback either running or throwing. It's the quarterback using a mesh point to decide whether to hand the ball to the running back or throw the ball down the field to a tight end, a receiver, or another running back, depending on who else you have in there. The quarterback certainly can run, and that's what gives Marco a little bit of an edge. It gives you a third option like you wouldn't get if it was, Spencer or Nate or somebody who's more of a pocket guy. But it's not like Cade can't run this, even if he's not going to be able to, he's not a super run threat, at least initially, as he's getting healthy.
Yeah. I mean, the opportunities are there, and if you can pick up some yards, do it. I mean, I think, you don't want to compare too much to this, but Brock Purdy is a good example. He took the opportunities against the Detroit Lions when they were there to run the football. He's not, and he ran at Iowa State too. And he was probably, I put his wheels on the same wavelength as CJ Beathard and Jake Rudock. Pretty good athlete, can run, but he's not Lamar Jackson, and Cade is probably a little bit step below that when he's healthy, but capable. Spencer was not really capable of that. Nate was capable of running right up the middle, and he did a good job of that, but not really much else other than that. So I think, it's a run pass option, and it's running back, mesh point, as you said, pull it back, throw, somebody's open down the field. And if they can master that manipulation, then it allows them to run downhill. Then they can, and then you're cooking. Then you're doing what Iowa wants to do, because when you put any hesitation on that second level, then it removes the barriers that are the lack of cut blocking, in Iowa's offense and scheme. So then it's, basically into the guy. And then once Iowa's linemen get into a second level player with full grip, they're not winning, period. I mean, Iowa is that well coached. So I like the optics of how it will look. And I also like the fact that they may be targeting the middle of the field with wide receivers a lot more often.
Yeah, no doubt. And Cade could operate, I think, a little bit like Tanner Morgan with RPO. I think similar body build, similar athleticism when Cade's healthy. So I think that might be a decent comparison. And the RPO is kind of would bring to this offense what we've been, asking for, which is, as Scott said, manipulation, deception, keeping the defense on its toes, not letting just 8 guys jam the box, 8-9 guys jam the box so you can't run. It can spread things out a little bit more. It's just it's creative, right? It's modern. It gives you what it says, options. You're not locked into things. You have options. That's what you want.
And it's it's an offense that we ran for, that people ran for, 15 plus years, that now is finally, okay. But, then again, I thought Iowa in 2020, when they were starting to use Wildcat, was like, okay, look at this. You're averaging 7 yards a carry when you're running Wildcat. Maybe you might want to keep that up. Oh, no, we think it's a gimmick offense. We're not going to do that, even when the offense can't move the ball to save its life, So I don't think that's the case now. I think this is something that they're going to have to buy into. And if they don't, then it's going to, this year, is a year where they have a good enough defense where they can handle it. But in 2025, if they want to go back to being caveman football, that's when the whole era is going to change and go away.
Yeah. All right. So looking forward to hearing from Tim Lester next week. We'll hear from him presumably before we do another podcast. So we'll have some of his ideas out there, and we can talk about this a little bit more, and we'll have plenty of off season to talk about football. Let's turn the page now, though, to current winter sports. Big game tonight for the men's basketball team. I feel like we've said this before, Scott. It is a must win, or must not lose, however you want to frame it tonight when Iowa plays host to Ohio State. That's a 6:00 tip at Carver Hawkeye Arena. FS1, I believe, is your TV location for that one. Interested to see what type of crowd on a Friday night at 6:00. This is a good time. I mean, you're going up against high school basketball, and I get that, but this should be a game that draws a decent crowd. And we've talked about this in watching the Nebraska-Wisconsin game last night. That crowd at Nebraska in Lincoln helped them win that game, and that's important. And we talked about it with football at Kinnick Stadium, the pre-snap penalties, things like that. I'm going off on a different tangent here, but we'll see if there's a crowd tonight that can help Iowa, because Iowa's going to need to help itself. It needs to play consistently. Played okay the other night at Indiana, but kind of fell down the stretch. The Hoosiers scored the last 8 points of that game after Iowa took the lead, so didn't make the plays down the stretch. But again, this has been a process, Scott, of trying to figure it out, trying to bring the pieces together, and they're still going through the process. But tonight has got to be a win.
When you look, Rob, at this season, there's a couple of losses that just stand out, and that's going to burn in Fran and the players. Indiana's going to probably be like number 3 on that list of this year. I think Michigan being number 1 in the December, and then Maryland last week. And we talked a little bit about, I think last week, about the Maryland game, that if you have a decent crowd there, you win. It was just Maryland was, they were able to do what they wanted. They were able to execute without any kind of, it was like playing one of those holiday tournaments. Then to those where it's like, there's like a couple hundred people in the stands type of thing. It's what it felt like. So they've lost 3 out of the last 4. And, right now they're at that point of you look ahead, you look in a couple of weeks. I mean, any of the opportunities they had to really make up ground and put themselves in a position to where they're advancing towards a bid if they play well, that's really out the window. I mean, they really have some. I mean, this is a game that if they don't get it, you can forget about it, because they're playing a team that's in their wheelhouse at home on a Friday night, as you said, and we all know how finicky Iowa fans are when it comes to these games at 6:00. Well, I can't get there because of work, and if it's 8:00, well, I got to work the next day, and I'm sure there'll be people saying, well, I couldn't have been at 8:00. I could have gotten there for that. But, overall, I think you'll see students probably go. It is Ohio State. And when you play, there's just something about playing the old school Big Ten teams. It's kind of like in hockey, the original 6. Mm-hmm. When you're playing teams you've played for 100+ years, that you've got kind of there's a different vibe to it. And I think that's going to be the case tonight. And it's a pivotal game because, I mean, Rob, if they don't win this game, they're not going to. They probably won't go to any of the tournaments. I mean, I hate to say it, but I think that's the case.
Yeah, already gave up the game against Michigan at home. You cannot give this game up. Michigan or Ohio State's 3-7 in the conference. You're 4-6. You could knock them down a peg while moving yourself back up into that middle. There's so many layers to this that point to it being a must not lose type game. And haven't watched a ton of Ohio State this year, Scott, but just they look really disconnected. Just they've got some nice individual pieces, but Chris Holtmann has not been able to bring this group together. You just hope that they don't catch it. They don't figure it out tonight at Carver Hawkeye Arena. And again, the home crowd could have something to do with that, and we'll see if it does. Peyton Sanford playing well, Tony Perkins playing well. You've got those two guys that are in a groove right now. You need them to keep maintaining it, and then you need Ben Krikke to get out of whatever funk he's fallen into. He was 2 of 8 against Michigan, 1 of 9 the other night against Indiana. He's starting to have some struggles against length, and there is length in the Big Ten. A lot more than you'll see in the Valley where he was playing. He needs to figure out a way, and we talk about this and use this analogy a lot, the baseball analogy of, adjustments between the pitcher and the batter. He needs to now adjust to what defenses are doing against him.
Yeah, right. He needs to take that step forward. But as you said before, I really like the way Peyton Sanford responded from the Maryland game. Yep. He was devastated after that game. I mean, he was in tears, could barely talk after the news conference, which it shows you how much it matters to him, and that's important. And so how did he respond? He responded in great fashion. I mean, came out and balled out the last 2 games. I like Tony Perkins a lot. I think he is taking, we talked about it in football, the senior stories, and he's one of them for the basketball team. Owen Freeman is an amazing freshman. Then what? Krikke has fallen down. You're not getting much out of Patrick McCaffrey. I think Josh Dix has been pretty good when he's played. I think he needs to play more. Can DeSante Bowen come in or Brock Harding come in and provide quality minutes?
I don't think Bowen played in the second half the other night, did he? If he did, it wasn't very much.
Yeah, I remember him in the first half. I don't remember him in the second half. And granted, he rode the hot hand, and certainly, Sanford is the hot hand. Although I thought it was kind of funny when he chucked that air ball like Caitlin Clark, and except Caitlin would have hit at least rim. But and then Fran was just kind of smiling. He's like this, I thought that was kind of funny, But good on Fran to not. Hey, this kid's a shooter. Let's let him shoot. So, tonight's a pivotal night.
Yep. And Owen, the one thing with Owen, and it's not unusual for freshmen, getting some of the ticky-tack fouls. He's got to avoid doing that because they really need him in the game. They're just so shorthanded when it comes to interior players that they need him out there as much as they can. He can't. If it means giving up a hoop, give it up. Don't take any cheap foul, or especially out on the floor. Out of the paint. Don't catch any reaching or trying to take charges out there and get in front of smaller guys that are dribbling, things like that. So I think if you can keep those 3 guys, Sanford, Perkins, Freeman, going at a good pace. Maybe Krikke can bounce back. I think he can. He's a smart kid, and he's a talented offensive player. He's just going to need to adjust his game a little bit because teams have countered what he does. And then, I think, like you said, Josh Dix is a pretty reliable, consistent player. But I think, what game? Was it the other night where they only got 4 points off the bench? I think Harding's 4 points the other night were the only bench points against Indiana.
Yeah, that's dreadful. Let me take a look here, Rob. I'm on the wrong one.
I'm pretty sure that's the case, but I could be off on that. I'm maybe confusing it with the Michigan game, but I think they got more off the bench against Michigan. I think the other night against Indiana, Harding had 4 points, and those were the only ones off the bench. And I don't think he scored his first points until the second half on a couple of free throws. Did you find the box?
No, they don't put them in the notes anymore. So,
oh well.
Sorry,
that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay.
Need more production off the bench.
Yeah, either way. Your point is well taken. That Iowa does need to do more with its bench, and it needs more points off the bench. It needs more execution, if nothing else. I mean, and I think that's part of it. There is just being able to have somebody who can, come in and affect the game. I mean, let's see here. Yeah, they only had 4 points off the bench. You're right. And it was just Harding. But, you had Dembele, was 0 for 4. Patrick McCaffrey was 0 for 3. And even Harding only had 1 field goal. So it was,
and it was late.
Yeah. So you're like, now all of them, but like the backcourt played a ton, all but 3.5 minutes. But you've got to get more out of that. It's just,
you saw what Anthony Leal did coming off the bench the other night and how important he was for Indiana. Can't get that every night. That was kind of an aberration, I think, but going to need more production off the bench, no doubt about it. Switch gears to the women's team. Scott moves up to number 3, this week in the rankings. Should hop up another spot, provided it wins at Maryland. Is it Maryland tomorrow?
Yeah, they're going to Maryland. They're on Big Fox with Gus Johnson.
And Maryland's struggling. I never thought I'd see Brenda Freese's teams struggle like this, but she's going to be ready and looking for a signature win against Iowa. So the Hawks will have to be prepared for that. But Kansas State lost the other night, so a win tomorrow would probably move Iowa up to number 2 behind South Carolina. Not that that matters, but it matters. You want a number 1 seed at the end of the day. Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say, I mean, if you want to be number 3 or number 2, you want to be number 2. I've watched Maryland. I watched them the other day before the Iowa game, and
they lost to Indiana.
Yeah, they lost to Indiana, and
no shame in that either. Indiana's a good team.
This is not the same Maryland team that we've been accustomed to watching. This is a struggle for them. I mean, they got bombed by Penn State bad, like by 45 points. And this is not the same.
Give up a crap load of points to Penn State, like 120 or something?
112. Yeah, it was like 112 to 70 something. And, they just don't have the players that they had last year or any other year. That happens from time to time, but it is a surprise when you see it to them. It might happen to Iowa next year, frankly, when you lose all these players. But it's going to be on Fox. I mean, it's amazing just how, they've we say it all the time, just how they've captured the imagination of the public. This game is sold out. It's one of 4 in Maryland's history that's been sold out. So you're going to get a great environment. You're going to get their best effort because you do know, as you said, Brenda Freese being from the same community, really basically as Lisa Bluter, they've developed a really good rivalry over the years. If she, I don't know if she's going to have a win one for the Gipper speech, but it's going to be, if you can win one game this year at all, it's going to be Iowa at home with that kind of environment, that kind of profile, because the whole world's watching Caitlin Clark now, and whatever they can do to slow her down or whatever, that's what they're going to try to do.
I love the first commercial was good with Jenny Taft, but the one with Reggie Miller coming in at the end, somebody call for an old pacer.
Yeah,
that one I like.
Yeah, I laugh. Yeah. I know. Seeing them, I was like, "Oh, this one's good." It's now, granted, they ran it like every break, so after a while, I'm like, "Oh, okay, maybe switch."
Danny DeVito, Jersey Mike commercials. They got stopped with the Danny DeVito commercials, and I love Danny DeVito. Louis De Palma is one of the greatest characters in the history of sitcoms, but for the Jersey Mike's commercials,
exactly, but. Caitlin Clark, what can we say about her? I mean, here she is, the leading scorer in Big Ten history, number 2 overall in NCAA history. Has done, I mean, to watch like the local Chicago television reports of these young girls and teenage girls that are going there. I mean, it's like Taylor Swift. I mean, they are so pumped to watch her play. It's unbelievable, Rob. I mean, it's like a phenomenon, whether it's, it's the 85 Bears meets Tiger Woods. I mean, meets Taylor Swift. I mean, it's really in that ballpark. And when you're going, I mean, by the end of the year, I mean, every game but 2 have either set attendance records at the arena or sold out completely. It's just amazing. I mean, to see that for a women's basketball player and a women's basketball program like Iowa has. I mean, and it hasn't affected them negatively. I mean, they faltered against Ohio State. down the stretch. But they've done that from time to time before too. And then they lost to Kansas State early in the year, which they played just absolutely poorly. So really, it's
and bounce back and beat Kansas State.
Yeah, right. They won down in Florida, and at the time we didn't realize how good Kansas State was, you know. And now you're looking at them going, yeah, they're pretty good. So the one thing I really like about the way they play, Rob, is going into the year we were all worried about the lack of a post, and they've decided, you know what, everybody needs to be worried about our guard play. So we're going to play 4 guards and 1 post for the most part, and nobody can stop them that way. If their transition's going, forget it. They're the best team in the country.
Yeah, that's the danger. We've talked about that, Scott, of, you know, if a team gets them into a half-court game with a strong post, that's probably the kryptonite.
Yeah.
And Ohio State did that to a degree, but it just took a really good effort for Ohio State to win that game at home. It happens.
Yeah.
But the other night, which you have 35, I think it was pretty much almost effortlessly scored 35. So Iowa moves on, has Maryland this weekend, and I think she's 100 and change, 103, 104 points away from Kelsey Plum.
Yeah, it's 103 or 4. I can't remember exactly what. But
so doing the calculations, if she continues at whatever she's averaging, 30 a game, that would put the Michigan game at home. I think people are targeting for her to break the record.
Yes, Michigan at home. Now, if she's averaging 35, which she's done, it could be the very end of the Nebraska game. But I would, I think for the sport, you don't want that, and not because of, now if it's in the 4th quarter and it's tied and she needs to score the points, she will, and it's on Fox. But that's great. But I think, doing it on Super Bowl Sunday, you become a footnote. What you want to do is do it at home, on a Thursday night, and Peacock's going, yes, please do, but if that could be the case, I mean, if you're Peacock, you should just move it to NBC and say, hey, we're gonna promote the crap out of this too. But
I don't know if you caught the other night in the post game. I don't know if it was a slip or just her, her emotions of becoming the all-time leading scorer in the Big Ten, but she kind of let slip that, it's kind of emotional as the games count down this season, which was kind of, some people took that to mean this is the end of the run. I don't know if she's firmly made up her mind there, but I get a feeling this is, and I think if you, like, to your point, Scott, about what it was like in Chicago when she hit the big city and the attention she got in the big city. Indianapolis isn't as big of a city, but it's a big city, and you could see there the impact she could have on a place like that. It was kind of cool to watch her be interviewed by Aaliyah Boston the other night too.
Oh yeah. The little joke about being teammates or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, that combination would be lethal. I would be surprised if she comes back. I just would. I think that she has done everything she could possibly do at this level. And people are like, oh, she's not going to be as big or as popular. I disagree, because she'll be bigger. She'll take her star with her. She'll
raise that league. She'll help expose that league.
Like Joe Namath, did with the AFL and how it changed, or Magic and Bird did with the NBA in the 80s. I mean, to take that to another level, and she's going to face all kinds of pettiness and jealousies. And, you've already seen it. You've already seen it from different coaches with their passive aggressive, comments about, well, our girls don't shoot 40 times a game like some of them do. And, but so what? That makes it more interesting, and you're going to have fans and you're going to have haters, and yes, she's going to go to the next level, and those same fans are going to flock to those arenas. And every time she comes to an arena, the LA Starks, the Chicago Sky, the Seattle Storm, the New York Liberty, and she's going to play against Sabrina Ionesco. Oh wow, this is a great matchup. People are going to want to watch. And that's something that's never happened. So I think this is I see her trajectory as this is it. And I know people in Iowa want her back under all these circumstances. I don't know that she could do more, Rob. In fact, I think that she can only come down. I think her popularity could wane a little bit, like she overstayed her welcome, and I don't want to diss Iowa by any stretch, but I just think that sometimes it's just time, go to the next level, play against the higher competition. I kid you not that last week, 2 of our top 5 stories on The Athletic were about Caitlin Clark. And it's
not surprising.
Yeah. I mean, it's about her and the court storm situation, and then also her with the USA, Team USA. They got the conundrum there. And then you look at this week, we had another story when she broke the record, and we have different people volunteering to go to these games. I don't think we understand just how big she is beyond the state of Iowa. I mean, they're all popular here, but Caitlin Clark, it's kind of like Jordan and the Bulls in the 90s. The Bears were still the most popular team in Chicago. Jordan was the most popular athlete in Chicago. But outside of Chicago, the Bulls and Jordan were bigger than life. And I think in some ways that's the kind of the same situation here. Caitlin Clark, can do no wrong and for a lot of segments of women's college basketball.
And she recently turned 22. So, that's part of the equation as well. And I'm with you, Scott. I think she's ready for a different challenge, a bigger challenge. And that's waiting for her in the league. I certainly would welcome her coming back. For us, it's great for business. As you said, She produces great numbers traffic-wise. It'd be great to have her back. I just want her to do whatever she feels is best for her. And I get a feeling that she's ready for a new challenge. But we'll see how that plays out as we get into the spring. Lastly, here before we get out, wrestling. I think we saw last week that there's kind of I don't know if you say a demarcation line, but Iowa went on the road and destroyed Illinois and Northwestern. So, it's kind of like there are a few teams in the Big Ten that can kind of hang around and have a shot at Penn State. I think Iowa is one of those teams. That'll be a week from today, so we'll preview that a little bit more on next week's podcast. But it's a matter of, can they get to that point? It's going to be super tough. But if anybody is going to be challenging Penn State, Iowa is one of those teams. And one of the guys who's of interest to us in multiple sports got on the mat again on Sunday. I think it was Sunday, right? At Northwestern? Yes.
Yeah.
At Northwestern, 45-second pin for Ben Keeter. He was much more happy with this performance than he was his first performance against Minnesota. It will be interesting to see if he's in the lineup against Kurt Vliet next week. We probably won't know until they take the mat.
Yeah, we won't know until then. But I think what we'll see is Ben Keeter is just continuously getting better. And yeah, his first match was he looked like he was dead for the last minute and a half to 2 minutes. Like he was just barely holding on. That was completely a different case against Northwestern.
You get breaks when you play linebacker.
Yeah. You get 7 seconds of hell or whatever, Iowa's defense, but then you got 30 seconds of breathing.
Right.
Nothing like that in wrestling. But I also he's such a committed athlete and always has been, and understands the situation that he probably, just making a guess, that after that match he probably went and rode the bike for 2 straight hours and was angry with himself. But, I guess, I feel bad that I didn't ask more wrestling questions of Tom Brands last week, after losing a total of one match, I think, against Illinois.
82-6.
Yeah.
Was the combined scores of those 2 duels.
2 matches then, right? Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. But those players or those wrestlers being out, I think the Penn State duel is probably where they'll get exposed a little bit.
Yep, and that's a week from tonight. Tonight, though, they wrestle at Michigan. I believe that's on the Big Ten Network. I believe you can catch that. 7:30 is a time that I have in my mind. I think there's a little bit of overlap between the basketball game and wrestling tonight for Hawkeye fans, but I think you'll be able to catch a lot of the duel on Big Ten Network if you're not at the Iowa basketball game, which is on FS1. I could have the time off there. Check your local listings, as we like to say. But yeah, we're getting toward the month turned to February, Scott. We're starting to get into the crunch time for wrestling, men's and women's basketball. It's kind of like, everybody's jockeying for position for the Big Ten tournaments. And we could talk about this as we get closer to the Big Ten tournament, the new format going forward, where some teams aren't going to get to go once they expand the Big Ten next season to 18 teams. But we'll talk to that. We've gone long enough today. Anything I left out, or you think we hit everything?
There's been so much going on, Rob, in the last 5 to 6 weeks. It's like, oh, what about this? But yeah, I mean, I guess just to touch on, in case people haven't heard, is, they'll still stay at 20 games. They'll still stay at 18 games for men's and women's basketball, 15 teams in the tournament. So the bottom 3 don't get to travel. And, that's just as well. I mean,
you don't need games. You don't need the tournament to start on Monday or Tuesday and go all the way to Sunday.
Yeah. You don't need the, 2 and 18 versus 5 and, 15, that type of thing. So just as well, you have your year, it's probably time to move on. Maybe you want to fire your coach anyway, or, just start looking ahead, and your fans don't care. And then, what I did find fascinating, Rob, though, was with the men's schedule in particular, is 14 single plays, and then there'll be 3 doubles. And they left it fairly ambiguous based on rivalry, geography, and competitiveness. And so, that's good. If you got, you'd hate to have, first of all, like 2 teams that are going to be great. Like, let's say like Purdue and UCLA are 2 of the top 5 teams, and it going into next year. You kind of want them to play twice, right? Or you also want Purdue to play Indiana. And then rivalry aspects. We all know that, Iowa has, Illinois is probably its blood rival. Wisconsin and Minnesota are rivals. Nebraska kind of is, I suppose, but like the old Big Ten is certainly rivalry, but Michigan State should play every year, and Indiana, Purdue should play every year. So I think that's also fair to try to keep together. And, maybe it's Rutgers and Penn State, they could play each other.
I like I'm with you. When I saw that, I'm like, that gives them the flexibility to be able to create the best matchups year to year.
Yeah. Because, why do you have a true rotation at this point? I mean, like Washington and Oregon should play twice. USC and UCLA should play twice. There's games that make sense, but then again, you don't want to have, we got to have a true rotation, so we're going to have Rutgers play Washington twice. Yeah, they should, they shouldn't do that. So, yeah, there's just all kinds of different things.
Yeah, you can check out those stories, and we'll talk more about that as the months go on here, and we get some more information on that stuff. And hopefully next week we'll be able to have some more discussion on the Tim Lester hire after we hear from him at his press conference expected early next week. So look out for coverage of that. We'll be back to talk about the latest competitions in men's and women's basketball, and also wrestling. Big recruiting weekend, junior day this weekend for Iowa football. We'll probably get some news out of that next week. So as we said at the top of this podcast, Scott, there is no off season. We have no off season. There is no downtime. It just keeps going.
Yeah, it's like infinity and beyond, man. I was just thinking about this with Tim Lester being hired. Okay, once that gets solved, next week we get the press conference, and then we start to move on thinking wise. What are the next stories? Well, Caitlin Clark timetable, men's basketball. People are going to start to gravitate. I mean, if they lose, then it's going to be like, well, do we get, how much longer does Fran have? And it's just going to be a constant talking point, whether he stays or not. It just will be. And then it'll be, spring football and new offensive coordinator, and let's see how Kaden Proctor does, and kind of on and on. And then finally get into May, and then it'll be recruiting, and then of course if there is a coaching change, that's I remember the last one. We'll
be here to talk about. Another note that I will throw in here in parting. John Rothstein, I believe, tweeted yesterday, Iowa and Utah up in Sioux Falls.
Yeah.
At the
Octagon.
Pentagon? Is that
Octagon?
Octagon?
Yeah.
Octagon. No, the Pentagon's in Washington.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Octagon is in Sioux Falls.
Yeah. A little different purpose, but
that's probably a good indication that this thing has run its course because my brain is turning to mush.
Yeah.
But there you go. Another marquee non-conference game not being played at Carver Hawkeye Arena, but we're not going to start that discussion now. That's for another day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whole other podcast.
Yeah. We'll have plenty of time to talk about that. All right, folks. We appreciate everybody listening to the podcast. Thanks again to our sponsors allowing us to bring you these podcasts free of charge, no Patreon, any of that stuff. As we've mentioned before, free Hawk-centric podcast Monday through Friday on this feed, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, flagship podcast with Pat Hardy and the guys from KCJJ. I'm here Tuesday for the mailbag. Scott and I are here most Thursdays. It's a Friday this week for the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. So if you can please subscribe, do all that fun stuff. It helps us out and we appreciate it. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll talk to you again next week. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.